Love has never been what we think it is. It may sound arrogant, but be honest with yourself for a moment. What you believe about love, desire, and the power between men and women, is it truly your own, or just what the world planted in you before you were old enough to question it? We grow up surrounded by stories, movies, and sweet advice mixed with illusion. They teach that men must lead, be strong, take initiative, while women are the ones to be chosen, conquered, and loved. But something feels off. Even when it all makes sense in theory, deep down there is an emptiness that no relationship can fill. Have you ever wondered why the most perfect relationships fall apart without reason? Why a woman who once enchanted you suddenly feels like a stranger you never knew? Or why some men, even with charm, status, and success, still feel powerless before a quiet woman? Love seems to obey no rule we were taught. It is like an ancient language only the soul understands, while the mind always mistranslates it. Socrates, the man who never wrote a single line yet transformed Western thought, spent his life doing one thing: asking questions. He did not seek affirmation, but truth, no matter how uncomfortable it was. He said a life unexamined is not worth living. And if he lived today, perhaps he would not ask, "How can I find love?" but, "Why do I need it so much?" He would not ask, "What do women want?" but, "Through whose eyes am I looking at them?" You may know that Socrates' wife was Xanthippe, known as hot-tempered, difficult, and sharp-tongued. People say she once poured a bucket of water over his head after an argument. Yet what makes Socrates fascinating is that he did not leave her. He laughed. "After thunder comes rain," he said. Many call that patience, but perhaps he saw in Xanthippe something others did not: a mirror, a silent, fierce power that could reflect and challenge a man's ego to its core. In the streets of Athens, women were rarely seen in public. They could not speak in assemblies, take part in politics, or write philosophy. But in their homes, at dinner tables, in the stories they whispered to their sons before bed, they passed down lessons deeper than any school could teach: how to listen, how to endure, how to see what others hide. In the shadows of a man's world, they still ruled it, not with words, but with presence. Socrates must have seen that. He did not just teach with speech, but with paradox. He faced politicians, poets, craftsmen, and women alike with the same curiosity. You think you know, but are you sure? And when he looked at his wife, who constantly made him confront his emotions and limits, he might have realized that true power lies not in the one who speaks the loudest, but in the one who makes others fall silent and think. Think about it. If a man could shake the whole city of Athens, yet bow his head before a woman in a small kitchen, perhaps he had touched another kind of truth. A power that needs no declaration, but makes everything around it adjust. The kind of power hidden in softness, in intuition, in eyes that see through disguise. And that is the power that keeps the world moving, even when everyone believes they are in control. You may not believe this, but remember the last time someone drew you in beyond reason, not because of looks, intelligence, or charm, but something deeper, an energy that made you want to come closer and run away at the same time. Maybe that is the power Socrates saw in his wife, a power that is never weak. It does not argue or prove. It simply exists, and its existence alone changes everything around it. We call it femininity, but it does not belong only to women. It is the soft part within every human being, the part that feels, connects, and accepts that not everything can be understood by logic. But society teaches men to forget that part, to be strong, in control, unyielding. And the moment they kill that softness inside themselves, they begin to fear it in others. The beauty of Socrates lies not in his intellect, but in his comfort with contradiction. He lived with a woman who challenged him, yet taught him what no book could: that a woman, in her passion and emotion, is not a problem to be solved, but a lesson in the essence of love itself. When we look at that relationship, a more unsettling truth emerges. Perhaps throughout history, the power of women has never vanished, only changed form. In societies that call women dependent, they still shape how children learn about love, the world, and themselves. A quiet mother can plant in her son the belief that love must be conquered. A gentle wife can change her husband's future with a single glance. That power comes not from speech, but from energy. And the truth is, most of us feel it, yet no one dares to admit it. We still like to believe we are in control, but often, the biggest decisions in a man's life are made because of the gaze of a woman he cannot understand. Maybe that is why Socrates stayed silent when asked about his marriage. He smiled and said, "Whether you marry or not, you will regret it." It sounds like irony, but it holds a deeper truth, because love always forces us to face ourselves, and there is no easy way to do that. If he lived today, perhaps he would not lecture in a hall, but sit beside you and ask a simple question. Who are you in love with? Her, or the image of her inside you? Because maybe what we have been chasing all along is not another person, but the feminine part of ourselves we have lost. And when you understand that, every idea about power, desire, and control dissolves like smoke. Only one thing remains: truth. A truth so light it feels frightening. That love does not come to make us happy, but to wake us up. That journey begins with a question, and that question still echoes. What women truly desire may never have been men, but men who dare to face themselves. In ancient Athens, people said women should remain silent, while men were born to speak, to lead, and to think. But strangely, among the loud squares of the city, men's voices would rise and fade, while the silence of women lingered. It seeped into every home, every meal, every dream of the children who grew up under their mother's quiet observation and intuition. People thought women were imprisoned within four walls, yet perhaps it was they who held the key to the human soul. When Socrates walked through the narrow streets of Athens, where men argued about virtue and politics, he must have known those debates were only smoke, because true power does not live in public speech, but in what no one dares to name: the power of emotion, of subtle influence, of the ability to make others change without asking them to. A glance, a gesture, a well-timed silence. Sometimes that alone can make a man fall or rise. His wife, Xantippe, was never gentle by any conventional measure. She did not fear conflict or anger. People called her the storm inside the philosopher's house, but perhaps Socrates understood that better than anyone. Because only in the storm do we see who we truly are. To him, Xantippe may not have been a wife to love in the traditional sense, but a mirror. Every time she challenged him, he was forced to face his own limits. That was not a comfortable kind of love, but it was the kind that matures the soul. The world today is not so different. Roles have changed. Women have voices, positions, and freedom. Yet that soft power, the kind that makes a man stop in the middle of the night to think about a single sentence, remains. It does not need titles or political authority. It hides in understanding. A woman may say nothing, yet the way she enters a room can shift the air. A sensitive man will feel it, even if he cannot explain it. There are kinds of power that do not need to be seen to exist. They are not loud or showy, but they spread like breath, like water flowing around stone, patient yet unstoppable. The world calls it the softness of women, but within that softness lies a primal strength. It is what built civilizations and what brought empires to their knees. Socrates must have understood that power. He once said that knowing you do not know is the beginning of wisdom. That may sound like philosophy, but it is also a reminder to men: never assume you understand women. The truth is, what women show is only the surface. What truly shapes the world, what they carry in silence, is as deep and ancient as the ocean. They feel before the mind can think. They know when you are not real, even if you say the right words. They know when you are hiding, even when you smile. And when they withdraw, when they fall silent, it is not weakness, but the instinct of survival that has existed for thousands of years. They go quiet, to observe, to protect themselves, to see if you are patient and sincere enough to walk through that mist. They know that words can be weapons, but silence is where power lives. Men, on the other hand, are taught the opposite: to speak, to act, to prove. And in that endless effort to prove themselves, they forget the art of listening, of feeling without control. That is why, when faced with that soft energy, many men feel lost. They try to explain it, fail, and get angry, because some things are beyond logic. Some things can only be understood through presence. But this difference was never meant for conflict. It exists for balance. The more a man learns to honor softness, the stronger he becomes. Not the kind of strength that frightens, but the kind that makes others feel safe. Women do not want men to dominate. They want someone who can see them, who can face both their light and their darkness without retreating. Modern society often confuses equality with sameness, but men and women do not need to be the same to stand equal. They only need to recognize the value of the energy they carry. Hardness is not stronger than softness, just as light is not better than shadow. Both need each other for the world to have form. Think of the last time you argued with the woman you love. You may have spoken hundreds of explanations, thousands of reasons. But in the end, what changed her was not your words. It was when you grew quiet, breathed slowly, and truly listened. In that moment, she felt what no words could express, your presence. And in that presence, distance began to dissolve. That is what Socrates, in an age of rational philosophers, understood early. He did not seek to win debates, but to touch essence. And perhaps the one who taught him that was not a student, but the wife all of Athens, once criticized. So if you think power belongs only to those who win, perhaps it is time to look again. There is another kind of power, quiet, gentle, yet strong enough to break any defense. It does not demand, it does not command, but whoever has felt it never forgets. Maybe that is why the wisest man in Greece accepted defeat in his own home and still smiled. Because he knew that sometimes truth only appears when we bow our heads. And sometimes the one who teaches us most is the one who makes us feel the smallest. Love, like wisdom, does not begin with understanding, but with accepting that some things cannot be understood. Only then do we truly learn to love. And perhaps within that silence, the silence of a woman, of a wordless night, of a gaze that unsettles us, we find our truest selves. Because love has never been a game of reason. It is a meeting of two souls, where power belongs not to the one who conquers, but to the one who can let go. There is something strange that few people dare to admit. Sometimes, what we love in another person is not them, but what they make us feel about ourselves. Every woman we have ever met, from the first glance to the final goodbye, is a mirror reflecting the unconscious part of us we have never faced. We call it attraction, destiny, or energy. But in truth, it is the soul searching for its missing piece. And when we do not understand this, we repeat the same old cycle. Love, pain, longing, then love again, as if our whole life were a search for something nameless we lost long ago. Modern men often believe they are free in love. They date, choose, and decide. Yet most of those choices do not come from awareness, but from memory. Maybe the memory of a distant mother, a lover who left, or a belief deeply carved in the heart that to be loved, one must be worthy. Those memories become patterns. We are drawn to those who make us feel familiar, even if familiar means pain. Because what is familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. Socrates once said that the path to wisdom does not begin with answers, but with questions. The path to true love, perhaps, begins with questioning oneself, not doubting others, but asking, why am I drawn to this? Why do I want this person so much? What in me is being awakened or threatened? That question is not easy to answer. It asks us to stay silent long enough to hear the echo from within, where the forgotten parts of ourselves are still waiting to be seen. Many people fear that silence. They fill it with noise, with dates, messages, and fleeting connections. But there is a truth that anyone who has ever truly loved knows. Silence is where all real emotion begins. Only when we stop, when we no longer try to reach for someone else, can we see where the real distance lies. And sometimes, that distance is not between two people, but between us and ourselves. Men are often taught to conquer, to control, to understand women. But some things cannot be understood, only felt. Trying to analyze a woman's emotions is like trying to measure the depth of the ocean with a ruler. You will only see the surface, while the real depth hides beneath dark water, beyond the reach of reason. Perhaps that is why many intelligent men still fail at love. They use logic to deal with what must be felt. And they forget that sometimes a woman's silence is the answer. True love is not a game of strategy, but a journey of awareness. The more we try to hold on, the more we lose. The more we try to understand, the more tangled we become. But when we begin to observe, without judgment, when we allow emotions to pass through without needing control, we start to see something small, yet profound. Every time we love, we are not truly loving another person. but the part of our own soul that awakens through them. Maybe you have met someone whose presence you could not explain. The moment they entered the room, your heartbeat changed. You felt as if you had known them forever, though you just met. That is not magic, but the call of something unfinished within you. That person did not appear to stay, but to awaken. And when they left, the pain you felt was not only the loss of them, but the loss of the chance to look deeper into yourself. Socrates said, "To know yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But knowing yourself is not only about understanding your thoughts or behavior. It is about recognizing the invisible forces that silently guide you. When you cannot see them, they control you. When you see them, you are free. And perhaps true freedom in love is not about choosing who to love, but knowing why you choose. Today's world is full of advice about love. Be strong, be confident, improve yourself. But the truth is much simpler. Women do not need a perfect man. They need a real one. A man who dares to see his own vulnerability without shame, who can admit his fear instead of hiding it behind logic or power. Because only then can a connection become real. If you are listening to this, somewhere in your heart you may have felt it before. That moment when someone made you see yourself, not through compliments, but through pain. Maybe they are no longer with you, yet what they left still lingers, like a door left slightly open. Do not try to forget. Look straight into that feeling. Ask it, "What have you come to teach me?" Because sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who bring us the greatest gift, the chance to be real. And perhaps, in that awakening, you will realize that every love in your life was simply a lesson in disguise. If something in these words touches your heart, say it. You do not need to shout or argue, just a thought, a feeling, maybe a short comment, or a quiet sharing with someone you trust. Because sometimes, speaking it out loud is how we admit that we are ready. And maybe, from that small moment, a true conversation begins, not between you and the world, but between you and the deepest part of your soul. Because understanding another person has never been the goal of love. Understanding yourself, that is where every real connection begins. The world has taught men to chase, to act, to pursue. But few have ever taught them how to sit still, observe, and truly listen. That is why, when faced with a woman's silence, many men feel uneasy. When confronted with emotions they cannot predict, they feel out of control. They do not realize that sometimes, in that very silence, a woman is speaking volumes, not through words, but through the frequency of emotion, through the way her body subtly tightens, through a gaze that does not try to explain, through a breath that slows in a moment of uncertainty. Women have long known how to use these languages, not to manipulate, but to survive. For thousands of years, the world has not always been kind to them. When they were not allowed to speak, they learned to feel. When they were forced into silence, they learned to read the smallest movements of another's soul. And when they could not use physical strength, they found the power of intuition, something men's logic often dismisses, yet it is frighteningly precise. That sensitivity became a legacy, passed down through quiet advice, through the glances between mother and daughter, through things that never needed to be said. Women understand men far better than men understand women. Not because they study psychology, but because they listen with their whole being. A woman can sense the pretense behind a smile, the distance in a touch, the exhaustion hidden beneath confidence. She knows when you are hiding, even when you think you are performing well. She knows when you are afraid, even when you cover it with calmness. She knows when you are truly present, even if you say nothing at all. That is why she does not need to control with words. She controls through awareness. Many men mistake this for a game, a tactic. They think women are complicated, unpredictable, and inconsistent. But the truth is, women only reflect what men are not yet ready to admit. They are mirrors of emotion. If you are at peace, they soften. If you're chaotic, they become unsettled. If you close yourself, they withdraw. They do not create the problem. They simply make the problem within you visible. Someone once said, "A woman is the wind, and a man is the flame. When the flame is weak, the wind puts it out. When the flame is strong, the wind makes it blaze." Perhaps that is the essence of every relationship. When a man fears softness, he seeks to dominate. When he fears being seen, he talks more, acts more, tries to control to avoid being hurt. But a woman does not need him to do all that. She only wants him to stay when all masks fall away. The world is full of advice about love strategies, the art of attraction, secrets to make women fall in love. But all of it is meaningless if you are not truly present. No one can love a person who is constantly trying to prove something. Women do not want a performer. They want a human being, honest enough to admit weakness, strong enough to hold another's silence, patient enough to listen instead of reacting. For centuries, men have been praised for mastering the material world, for building, conquering, and inventing. Yet the world of emotion, where no law can be measured, has always belonged to women. And that is not injustice, it is balance. Without that realm, humanity would be only an empty shell of logic, capable of doing, but unable to feel. It is within that soft space that all creativity and meaning are born. When Socrates said that wisdom begins with knowing you do not know, he was not only speaking of knowledge, he was speaking of humility, something men often lose when they believe they understand everything. Just as in love, the one who listens learns more than the one who insists on being right. Perhaps that is why he chose to stay with a woman all of Athens, called difficult, because only through the discomfort Xantippe created did he come to see the limits of his own ego. Women do not fight with weapons. They fight with patience. They do not conquer with power, but with understanding. And when you stand before them, bare and unguarded, they will see what you try to hide even from yourself. It may be fear, pain, or the softness you have long denied. If you are not ready to face it with them, you will walk away. But if you stay, if you dare to look together, you will begin to understand what 1,000 years of philosophy never could, the true power of love. A woman's silence is not emptiness, but a mirror. It reflects you, every breath, every vibration. When you are lost, it grows distant. When you are real, it softens. And when you are brave enough to stop trying to understand and simply feel, you begin to hear what words can never say. Love, in the end, is not a dialogue between two people. It is a conversation between two beings, where emotions speak their own language, where silence carries more truth than any promise. And only those who know how to listen will ever hear it. There are loves that come like a strange wind, touch you for a moment, and disappear, yet leave an echo strong enough to change you forever. Some people appear not to stay, but to make you face a mirror you have never dared to look into. When we love, we do not only meet the other person, we meet ourselves within them. And sometimes, that is the part that frightens us most. Socrates once said that he never taught anyone anything. He only helped them give birth to their own truth. Perhaps love is the same. It does not bring answers. It forces us to face the questions we have always avoided. Why do we need to be loved so much? Why are we afraid of being abandoned? Why does the world collapse when the one we love falls silent? Love does not make us weak. It only reveals how fragile we truly are. And that fragility, if we dare to face it, is where maturity begins. Some say a man is strongest when he can protect others. But perhaps greater strength lies in being able to sit still and not run from the fire of his own emotions. Every action is easier than acceptance, easier than admitting that sometimes we cannot control how others love us, leave us, or grow silent toward us. It is in that very moment, when reason has no answers, that the soul begins to speak. A man may survive war, hardship, every external trial, yet fall before a single gaze. Not because he is weak, but because that gaze touches the part he has never been allowed to show. When a woman looks deep enough to see the fear within him, he has two choices: to close himself off, or to let everything collapse and allow a new self to be born. That is the moment of transformation, where love stops being attraction and becomes a sacred ritual. Socrates believed that true knowledge does not come from books, but from dialogue, between two souls brave enough to strip themselves bare. Love is the same. It is not built on perfection, but on imperfect conversations. On nights when two people sit in the dark, unable to say everything they feel, yet still choose to stay. Because, sometimes, staying is already the answer. Since ancient times, humanity has told stories of goddesses and heroes, of the meeting between reason and emotion, order and chaos. But what those myths truly describe is psychology. The woman in those stories is not only a lover, but a challenge, a mirror, a doorway into a world the man must cross himself to enter. When he understands her, not through logic, but through empathy, he not only touches love, he touches his own soul. Women, consciously or not, have always been guides on that journey. They do not heal men. They create the space for men to see themselves. And if he is brave enough, he will discover what every philosopher and every faith has tried to say in different words, that true love is not meant to make us happy, but to awaken us. There are loves that make us better, and loves that break us apart. But if you look closely, both serve one purpose: to dissolve the ego, because only when the ego fades can the soul learn to love not from need, not from fear, but from pure presence. In Greek philosophy, there is a word catharsis, purification through pain. It was seen as the peak of tragedy, when the hero must lose everything to discover who he truly is. Perhaps love is a tragedy like that. No one walks away unchanged, but if we let it transform us, we walk away lighter, clearer, closer to truth. Think back to the last time you loved someone so deeply it scared you, not because you feared losing them, but because you feared that if they saw your true self, with all its fear, weakness, and brokenness, they would leave. But if they stayed, if they touched you without trying to fix you, that was the rare moment when a soul truly felt seen, understood, and accepted. And sometimes, being seen once like that is enough to change a life. Love never promises safety. It does not come to calm the storm, but to lead you into it. Because in the heart of that chaos, all your defenses fall. The roles, the identities, the old beliefs, they all dissolve, and what remains is your truest self. That is why love terrifies us, because it is not just pleasure, it is the death of the ego. Socrates once asked his students whether they would still pursue knowledge if they knew it would destroy their old beliefs. That question, when placed in love, still holds true. To love truly is not to seek happiness, but to accept the loss of your old self in order to become someone more real. And the woman, through her presence and her depth, is the fire that makes that transformation possible. Perhaps that is why men, though afraid, still seek love, because their souls know that within it, though painful, lies a freedom found nowhere else. Freedom from illusion, from roles, from the need to always be right. What remains is truth, in its most fragile yet most beautiful form. And perhaps it is in that very fragility that a man finally becomes strong. There is a truth most men are afraid to admit. What they seek in women is not only love, but completion. They do not realize that when they look for someone to fill their emptiness, they are handing over the power to define who they are. So when love ends, they do not just lose a person, they lose their direction, their sense of self. But if a man dares to sit within that loss, to look deeply into the emptiness love has left behind, he will begin to feel something move inside him. It is no longer the hunger to be loved, but the desire to become whole. Socrates once said, "To understand the world, you must first understand yourself." But knowing oneself is never an easy journey. It requires facing what we once despised or denied, our weakness, our fear, our loneliness. And strangely, love is what brings those parts to the surface most clearly. Because when we love, we cannot hide. A woman, if she is sensitive enough, will see everything. She does not need you to confess. She knows when you are running away. She does not need to test you, because her intuition is rarely wrong. Men who have never faced themselves are often afraid of such women. They feel threatened by the piercing gaze, by the silence that asks no questions yet reveals everything. They want something predictable, controllable, a kind of love they can manage. But true love cannot be managed. It is a realm where reason loses its power, and every psychological wall becomes meaningless. And the woman, in her natural being, is the doorway into that realm. Women do not need perfect men. They need men who are present, men who do not run when emotions become too real, who do not try to fix or judge, but simply stay, even when they do not know what to do. That is the strength modern men have forgotten, the strength of presence. It is not an action, but a state of being. A man can sit in a room with the woman he loves, say nothing, not even touch her, and she will feel safe, because in that moment, he is not in the past, not in the future. He is there, completely. But to reach that presence, he must go through a process much like an ancient ritual, the death of the ego. In the Greek mystery schools, it was believed that to gain true knowledge, the soul must die before the body does, die to illusion, habit, and pride. Love demands the same. It asks us to die as the one who needs to control, so we may be reborn as one who knows how to feel. When we stop holding on, when we stop fearing loss, when we look at the woman before us, not as mine, but as a soul walking beside us through life's lesson, that is when we begin to understand what it really means to love. Some women come into a man's life only to teach him that. They love deeply, but leave at the right moment. They break him open, but in doing so, they awaken him. After them, he can never love the old way again, because once you have seen yourself reflected in someone's eyes, you cannot return to unconsciousness. And even as you move on, even as you love another, there remains a quiet space inside you that knows love is no longer possession, but reverence. A man who has walked through that fire becomes different. He no longer seeks a woman to prove his worth, but to share his presence. He no longer needs to win because he understands love is not a competition. He no longer hides his vulnerability because he knows it does not make him less, it makes him real. And that truth is what women sense first. A mature woman is not drawn to outer strength, but to depth. She does not care what you can do, but how long you can stay true to yourself. She will test you, not to cause pain, but to see if you can stand still in the storm. When she cries, when she gets angry, when she pushes you away, she is really asking one question: are you safe enough for me to be myself? If you can stay, if you do not react or defend, if you simply look at her with the stillness of understanding, something miraculous happens. The anger melts, the tears dry, and in that moment, love becomes a shared space between two souls, no longer a stage for two egos. It is that rare moment when both feel, this is real. This is what every love before was only a rehearsal for. But to reach that moment, a man must walk a lonely path. No one can do it for him. No woman can heal him. She is only the mirror. The act of looking into that mirror, accepting both his light and his darkness, is his own task. And when he does, he not only loves better, he lives more truthfully. That is the moment a man stops searching outward, because he has found inward. He no longer needs love to feel enough. He becomes love itself, not in a romantic sense, but in the deepest one, the harmony between awareness and presence. And when a man like that loves, love is no longer an exchange, but illumination. A woman can feel it. She no longer needs to defend, to guess, or to test him, because when he is real, she is free to be herself. And the two of them, even in silence, understand that they have entered rare ground where no one needs to play a role. That is when love ceases to be a question. It becomes the answer. Socrates once said, "The strongest man is not the one who conquers others, but the one who conquers himself." And perhaps nowhere is that truth tested more fiercely than in love, because love does not care who you are out there, how successful you've become, or how many people you can control. In front of a woman who truly sees you, every mask becomes useless. She does not see status or achievement. She feels the energy within you, and if that energy is filled with fear, pretense, or the hunger to be validated rather than connected, she will know, not through reason, but through intuition. The same intuition men still call a woman's instinct. Most men are not afraid of women. They are afraid of what women awaken in them. Because when a woman is fully present, when she needs no proof, no argument, when she simply is, her energy becomes a mirror. She makes a man see himself not the version he wants to see, but the parts he hides. His weakness, his fear of abandonment, his quiet sense of not being enough. And when faced with that kind of reflection, a man either runs or wakes up. A woman does not need a perfect man. She needs a present one, someone who does not withdraw when she's angry, who does not attack when she cries, who does not disappear when she grows silent. She does not need promises. She needs truth. And truth cannot come from a man still running from himself. Only when he can stand still in the storm of emotion, hers and his own, does he begin to understand the essence of strength. Not the strength of muscle, but of awareness. Not control, but awakening. Men are taught to win, but no one teaches them how to surrender to what is real. When a man dares to surrender, he does not become weaker. He becomes deeper. He starts to hear what he was once too restless to hear. The breath of the one beside him, the rhythm of his own heart, the quiet moments where love exists without needing words. Women recognize this immediately. Because the energy of true presence cannot be faked. It has its own frequency. And when it appears, it melts every defense. There is a paradox. Women do not want to control men, but they will instinctively test them to see if he is truly steady. They do it not for power, but for safety. The instinct to feel safe in the space of a man who does not collapse when things become uncertain. When she storms, he remains the sky. When she cries, he remains the shoulder. When she grows silent, he remains there. That is not endurance, it is mature love. The love of one who has learned not to react, but to be present. And then, when both let go of the need to be right, what remains is a strange stillness, not loud, not dramatic, not passionate, but so deep it makes time stop. In that stillness, the man no longer seeks validation, and the woman no longer feels the need to protect herself. They are not two opponents, but two parts of one flow. And that is when love becomes something language cannot describe, not a feeling, but a state of being. Socrates once taught that death is not to be feared, because those who live in truth have already died to illusion. Perhaps that is also true for love, because when a man dares to love for real, he must die in layers of disguise. He loses his false confidence, his hollow pride, his old definitions of what it means to be a man. Yet in that loss, he is reborn not as someone seeking to be loved, but as someone who is love itself. When a man reaches that state, he no longer needs anything from a woman. He simply wants to see her, truly see her. He does not want to change her, fear losing her, or turn her into an idea in his mind. He looks at her as one looks at a flame, beautiful, alive, dangerous, and sacred. He does not want to control her. He wants to understand. And in that gaze, the woman feels free. She no longer has to hide her anger, her fear, her passion, or her pain. She can simply be completely. When that happens, love is no longer a transaction, no longer a game, no longer a battle between the sexes. It becomes an ancient ritual. The soul has always known the ritual of presence. One who sees, one who is seen. One who opens, one who does not run. And in that moment, there is no man or woman in the old sense anymore. There are only two souls illuminating each other. And that is why this truth frightens so many. Because once you know how to love like this, you can never go back. You can no longer play the silence game, pretend to be busy, or use tactics. All of that becomes meaningless. Once you are awake, you cannot fall asleep in old illusions again. And this, perhaps, is what women secretly hope men never discover. Not because they want to keep power, but because once this is understood, every game ends. There is no winner, no who loves more. When men awaken, everything shifts. They no longer seek someone to conquer, but someone to walk beside. They no longer need love to save them, but use love as a way to return to themselves. That is the moment the journey ends, but also the moment a new life begins. The life of a man who has walked through fire, melted, and been reborn. The man who no longer asks, "How can I be loved?" but whispers, "How can I love more deeply?" And when he asks that question, the world falls silent, because every answer already lives inside that silence. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.